Shame is like mold. It grows in the dark, in the hidden corners of our minds where no one can see it. And the more we try to bury it, the stronger it becomes. That's the terrifying thing about shame. It doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs you to stay quiet. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that we should keep our struggles to ourselves. We've heard things like, don't talk about that, or what will people think? So we stay silent. We pretend we're fine when we're falling apart inside. We put on a mask and hope no one sees what's really going on. But deep down, the shame festers. Brené Brown teaches us that shame grows in 3 specific conditions: secrecy, silence, and judgment. These 3 act like fertilizer for shame. When we keep things secret, like past trauma, our fears, or our sense of unworthiness, we start to believe that we're alone, that no one would understand, that if they knew the truth, they'd turn away from us. And when we stay silent, when we choose not to speak up about what we're feeling, we begin to internalize the lie that we are the problem. The silence becomes deafening. We begin to believe we're broken, that we're the only ones struggling, and that something is fundamentally wrong with us. Judgment, whether from others or from ourselves, is the sharpest weapon shame uses. Think of how many times you've heard that inner voice say, "You're such a failure," "You'll never be good enough," or "You don't deserve love." That's shame speaking. And it often sounds like your own voice. It convinces you that if people really knew you, they'd walk away. So you judge yourself before they get the chance. But what's dangerous is not just that shame exists. It's that we don't talk about it. We act like it's not there. We keep scrolling, smiling, and surviving. But inside, we're shrinking, we're dimming our light, we're avoiding risks and connection. Shame doesn't just hurt us emotionally, it shapes our entire lives. It influences what we believe we're capable of, what we think we deserve, and whether we even try to pursue our dreams. Shame doesn't need to scream. It just needs you to stay quiet. We live in a world that rewards perfection and punishes exposure. From a young age, we are taught to toughen up, to never let them see you sweat, and to keep our emotions in check. The result, we equate vulnerability with fragility. We believe that to be open, to show our emotions, to say, "I need help," or "I'm scared," makes us weak. But Brené Brown flips that narrative completely, because vulnerability is not weakness. It is the purest form of courage. Think about the moments in your life that required true bravery. Maybe it was telling someone you loved them without knowing if they felt the same. Maybe it was admitting you made a mistake that hurt someone else. Maybe it was showing up after a failure and trying again. None of these moments involved physical strength or dominance. They involved emotional risk. They involved uncertainty. That's what vulnerability is, showing up and being seen, even when there are no guarantees. Vulnerability is the space between what we want and what we fear. It's the moment we say, "This is who I am," with no armor, no mask. It's terrifying, but it's also where real connection happens. According to Brene, vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. Without it, those things cannot exist. You cannot truly love if you're not willing to risk heartbreak. You cannot truly belong if you're always pretending to be someone else. You cannot create anything meaningful without risking judgment. But here's the tragedy: most of us have learned to shut down our vulnerability as a form of protection. We armor up. We hide behind sarcasm, silence, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. We don't say what we really feel. We don't ask for what we really need. We avoid difficult conversations. Why? Because we're afraid. Afraid of being rejected, afraid of being laughed at, afraid of not being enough. And yet, every time we choose to protect ourselves instead of showing our real selves, we pay a price. We become disconnected from others and from our own hearts. We may feel safe, but we also feel empty, because real connection, the kind that heals, the kind that fills us with purpose, only happens when we're willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability isn't just personal. It's also professional. Leaders who admit they don't have all the answers build more trust. Teams that allow open conversations innovate faster. Artists, writers, and creators who share their truth move us because they're not afraid to expose their souls. Vulnerability is not about oversharing. It's not about spilling your guts to strangers or being emotionally raw all the time. It's about honesty. It's about showing up fully without pretending. It's about being seen and letting others be seen too. One of the most profound distinctions that Brené Brown teaches is the difference between shame and guilt. While these two emotions often feel similar and are frequently used interchangeably in everyday language, they are not the same. And understanding the difference is crucial to personal growth, emotional resilience, and healing. Let's start with guilt. Guilt is the feeling that arises when we evaluate a specific behavior or action and recognize that it was wrong. It sounds like this: I did something bad, I hurt someone, I need to make it right. Guilt is action-oriented, it's uncomfortable, yes, but it can be constructive. It leads us to apologize, to correct mistakes, to grow. Guilt allows us to stay connected to our values. It tells us that while our behavior may have fallen short, we are still fundamentally good and capable of doing better. Now let's look at shame. Shame goes deeper. Shame doesn't just attack the behavior, it attacks the self. Shame says, I am bad, I'm unlovable, I'm not enough. It isn't focused on what you did, it's focused on who you are. And that's where it becomes toxic. While guilt can lead to growth and accountability, shame leads to paralysis, secrecy, and isolation. It doesn't motivate change. It convinces you that change is impossible because you are the problem. Think of a child who breaks a rule. If they feel guilt, they might say, I shouldn't have done that, I'll try to do better. If they feel shame, they might say, I'm such a bad kid, no one loves me. One leads to learning, the other leads to fear and emotional withdrawal. The same applies to adults. When we carry shame, we don't just feel regret, we feel worthless. What's even more dangerous is how silently shame operates. It often disguises itself as depression, anxiety, perfectionism, or even anger. People who seem angry at the world are often deeply ashamed of themselves. People who chase success obsessively may be running from a deep sense of unworthiness. Shame wears many masks, and unless we name it, it controls us. Brené Brown's research shows that people with high levels of shame are more likely to experience depression, addiction, aggression, eating disorders, and even suicidal ideation. It corrodes our sense of self-worth from the inside out. And worst of all, it convinces us that we don't even deserve help, that we have to fix ourselves in silence. But perhaps the most painful part of shame is that it disconnects us from others. Shame says, if they really knew me, they'd leave. So we hide, we pretend, we build walls, and every time we do, we lose a little more of our authentic self. We trade truth for safety, but at a high emotional cost. Perfectionism is often praised in our culture. We wear it like a badge of honor. In job interviews, we even claim it proudly. My biggest flaw, I'm a perfectionist. But Brené Brown teaches us something radically different. Perfectionism is not a strength. It's a defense mechanism, and at its core, it is driven by shame. To understand perfectionism, we need to go beyond the surface. Perfectionism is not the same as striving for excellence. Striving for excellence is internally motivated. It's about doing your best because you care, because you're passionate, because it matters to you. Perfectionism, however, is externally motivated. It's about trying to avoid criticism, shame, and rejection. It's about trying to prove your worth to others. Perfectionism whispers, if I look perfect, act perfect, and do everything perfectly, then I can't avoid judgment, blame, and shame. It's a survival strategy. It tells you that your value lies in how flawless you appear, not in who you are. But the truth is, perfectionism doesn't protect you. It traps you. It keeps you stuck in cycles of fear, procrastination, self-doubt, and overworking. You begin to believe that anything less than perfect is failure, that mistakes define you, that flaws make you unlovable. And so you pour endless energy into getting everything just right. Your appearance, your work, your relationships, until you're exhausted, anxious, and still convinced you're not enough. It's important to realize that perfectionism isn't just about being organized or detail-oriented. It can be subtle and sneaky. It can show up as people-pleasing, where you try to meet everyone's expectations to avoid disapproval. It can show up as indecision, where you're too afraid to make a choice unless you're sure it's the right one. It can show up as procrastination, where you delay starting something because you're terrified it won't be good enough. At the heart of all of this is a deep fear of being seen. Perfectionism tells you that the real you isn't worthy. So you build a polished version of yourself to present to the world, a version that's curated, controlled, and careful. But that version is also lonely because when you live behind a mask of perfection, no one really knows you. They only know the version you allow them to see. Brené Brown calls perfectionism a 20-ton shield. It's heavy, it slows you down. And worst of all, it doesn't even work. It doesn't prevent pain. It just prevents connection. Because real connection happens when we allow ourselves to be seen as we truly are: messy, human, imperfect, and deeply worthy. Perfectionism doesn't lead to success. It leads to burnout. It leads to shame. It leads to a constant sense that no matter how much you do, it's never enough. And that's because it's not based on self-worth. It's based on fear. Shame is isolating. It convinces us that we are alone in our struggle, that no one could possibly understand what we're going through, and that if they did, they would walk away. That isolation gives shame its power. But Brené Brown reminds us again and again, empathy breaks that power wide open. Empathy is not pity. It's not sympathy either. It's not about feeling for someone. It's about feeling with them. It's about sitting beside someone in their darkest moment and saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here. I see you. You're not alone. Empathy is presence, it's connection. It's one human being holding space for another without judgment, without trying to fix, and without turning away. The moment someone meets our pain with empathy, something shifts. The shame that felt so heavy, so unbearable, suddenly feels lighter, because now we're not carrying it alone. When someone listens without trying to minimize our feelings or rush us toward a solution, we begin to heal. Not because they solved the problem, but because they stayed. Shame tells us you are unworthy of love. Empathy responds, you are deeply human and deeply loved. And the more we experience empathy, the more we realize that our worthiness isn't tied to our perfection. It's tied to our humanity. But here's the important part. Empathy takes courage. It requires us to be vulnerable too. To connect with someone in their pain, we have to reach into our own. That's why some people avoid offering empathy. They don't want to feel their own shame, grief, or fear. It's easier to say things like, at least it's not worse, or everything happens for a reason, or you should be grateful. These are not empathetic responses. They are subtle rejections. They tell the person, your pain is making me uncomfortable, so I'm going to shut it down. True empathy resists that impulse. It slows down. It leans in. It listens with the intent to understand, not to respond. It allows discomfort because it knows discomfort is where real connection begins. And empathy is not only something we offer others, it's something we must learn to offer ourselves. Self-empathy is the ability to recognize our own suffering and respond with compassion instead of criticism. When we make a mistake, instead of saying, I'm such a failure, we say, that was hard. I'm struggling, but I'm still worthy. Self-empathy disrupts the internal shame dialogue and creates space for healing. Empathy also requires boundaries. It's not about absorbing other people's emotions or fixing their lives. It's about standing beside them, grounded in your own strength, and offering connection without losing yourself. It's about saying, I'm here with you, but I'm not trying to take over your pain. I trust you to carry it. I'm just here so you don't have to carry it alone. Brené Brown says that when we share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame cannot survive. It withers in the face of connection. Because what shame needs to thrive is silence, secrecy, and judgment. And empathy is the opposite of all three. In our efforts to avoid pain, many of us unconsciously begin to numb our emotions. We push down the sadness, avoid the fear, distract ourselves from grief, and silence the feelings that feel too heavy to carry. We tell ourselves things like, I don't have time to feel this, or it's not that big of a deal, or if I ignore it, it will go away. But what we don't realize is what Brené Brown teaches so clearly: you can't selectively numb emotions. When you numb the dark, you also numb the light. Emotions are not separate files we can manage one at a time. They are deeply interconnected. The same vulnerability that allows you to feel grief is also what allows you to feel joy. The same heart that breaks with disappointment is the heart that soars with love. If we build walls to keep out pain, we also block out passion, connection, creativity, and meaning. Many people turn to numbing behaviors to escape emotional discomfort. And these behaviors aren't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it looks like endlessly scrolling on your phone. Sometimes it's binge watching shows until you feel nothing. Sometimes it's staying busy 24/7 so you don't have a single moment to sit with your thoughts. Sometimes it's drinking, overeating, overworking, people-pleasing, or obsessing over productivity. These behaviors may offer short-term relief, but they come at a long-term cost, because every time we choose to numb, we're not healing, we're avoiding. And the more we avoid, the more disconnected we become from ourselves, from others, and from life itself. Brené Brown points out that we live in a culture that encourages numbing. We are sold the idea that happiness is a product, a destination, a filtered version of life. We're told to stay positive and just move on, as if struggling makes us weak. But when we suppress negative emotions, they don't disappear. They just find another way to express themselves, often through anxiety, rage, burnout, depression, or physical illness. And here's the truth we often resist feeling is not weakness, it's wisdom. Emotions are messengers. They carry information. Sadness might be telling you something matters. Anger might be signaling that a boundary has been crossed. Fear might be asking you to protect yourself. When we listen to our emotions instead of numbing them, we gain insight, resilience, and depth. Feeling our emotions doesn't mean we're consumed by them. It means we're aware of them, we're honest about them, and we allow them to move through us instead of getting stuck inside us. Emotional suppression is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You might succeed for a while, but eventually it will shoot to the surface, often at the worst time. What Brene reminds us is that we must build the courage to sit with discomfort, not escape it. When we allow ourselves to fully feel what we're feeling, we begin to build emotional strength. We develop a deeper understanding of ourselves. We stop reacting blindly, and we start responding with intention. And perhaps most importantly, we open ourselves up to the full spectrum of human experience. When we stop numbing, we begin to feel the small, beautiful, quiet joys of life again. The belly laughs, the sunsets, the sense of awe, the love that makes our chest ache. All of it. We become fully alive, not because life gets easier, but because we are finally present for it. We all carry stories within us. Some of them are full of joy, triumph, and transformation, but others are harder to face. Stories of pain, rejection, failure, trauma, and loss. Often, those are the stories we keep hidden. We bury them deep inside, wrap them in shame, and convince ourselves that if anyone knew the truth, They would see us differently. They would think we're broken, damaged, unworthy. But Brené Brown teaches something radically healing. The parts of our story we're most afraid to share are often the very ones that hold the most power. Not because they're perfect, not because they're easy, but because they are real. And when we learn to own our story instead of being owned by it, we reclaim our voice, our courage, and our freedom. Shame wants you to edit your story before you tell it. It wants you to cut out the messy parts, the failures, the breakdowns, the wrong turns. It tells you that your story only matters if it's polished and successful. But what if the power of your story isn't in its perfection, but in its honesty? What if the messy parts are the most human, the most relatable, the most liberating? Your story doesn't have to be extraordinary to be powerful. It just has to be true. When you speak your truth, not the version you think others want to hear, but the real, raw, unfiltered truth, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror for someone else's hidden pain. You become proof that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to struggle, that it's possible to survive what you thought would break you. There is deep strength in saying, this is what I've been through, and I'm still here. That statement, spoken with honesty, carries more power than 1,000 perfectly curated stories because it shows resilience, it shows humanity. It shows that wounds can heal and that darkness doesn't erase your worth. Often, we think we have to wait until the story is finished to share it. We think we have to wait until we've completely healed, figured it all out, and turned our pain into a picture-perfect lesson. But healing is not a straight line, and your story is valid even while you're still living it. The fact that you're still walking through the fire is part of what makes it worth telling. And here's something Brene emphasizes: you don't owe your story to everyone. Sharing your story is not about oversharing or putting your pain on display for strangers to critique. It's about choosing safe people, those who've earned the right to hear your truth. It's about choosing courage over comfort. It's about saying, I refuse to let shame silence me anymore. Every time you own a part of your story, especially the part you've been hiding from, you take back a piece of yourself. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You begin to live in alignment with who you really are. And that alignment, that authenticity, becomes a source of energy, peace, and empowerment. Our stories are what connect us. Not the picture-perfect versions, but the vulnerable, unfinished, honest ones. The moment you stop running from your story and begin to stand in it, even with trembling legs, you become powerful in a way shame can't touch.